Hey fellas, hope everybody's doing well. I have not posted in a while and I have been busy. I've been trying to correct a few mistakes that I've had on my channel. One of those is my card holder experiments. The mistakes I had caused me to go ahead and take down the videos I've done in the past of my analysis of baseball card holders. And probably upon further review, I didn't necessarily need to do that, but the mistakes bothered me enough that I'm glad I did. So I've taken my last three major card experiments and I've put those all into one slide deck, of which I'm going to show you today. My hope is that means this is going to be a relatively short video. I'm not going to get into all the science of how cards are made, how they're printed, how the spectrometer we used or the different experiments we did with a spectrometer or anything like that. One of the reasons I'm not doing that is I am not an expert in any of this. I have a friend who has a spectrometer, and he's a chemist. And I've talked to a few folks about printing and cards and whatnot as well. And some of that's been through channels. So we have some pretty amazing people in the YouTube sports card collecting hobby. I forgot his first name, but Sexton's Kentucky Cards or something along those lines. I'll put it up in the list, but he is pretty amazing and provided a wealth of information, which helped provide some of the context to the things that we found. But again, I'm not necessarily going into that for these slides. So let's start looking at the slides, the analysis of baseball cards and baseball card holders. All right, fellas, this is by my buddy and I. He's a chemist. He has a spectrometer and he's willing to share it. And I get bored, so I'm not a chemist. I am just a curious person. I typically learn a lot through using my hands and stuff. So, all right. Here we go. So the first one, we're going to start with the 2023 experiment. And that was looking at baseball card holders, or pardon me, baseball cards, to find out which ones faded the most. And probably no surprise, everything from 1957 to 1986 had substantial to significant fading. They also were not glossy cards. And then in 1997, we start seeing a little more gloss on the cards. And it could be earlier, I'm just saying that decade from the 90s. Started seeing gloss on the cards and the fading changes a little bit. And so we'll discuss that as well. So my change scale, I did a scale with 5 different words, minor being the least, significant being the most, and anything in between there is some version of that. Okay, some of the reasons I think for time between 1957 and 1986 that we see some change in fading is more of based off the color and not necessarily the ink. But I don't know that to be a fact. That's just some of the speculation. And then the 2005 Topps Andy Pettitte card just shows some interesting effects as well. So some pigments withstand sunlight, fading better than others. Yellow was degraded the most. And as we have discussed, or if you've watched my previous videos, which I've taken down in the past, UV is the main cause for color deterioration or bleaching because it's breaking down the chemical bonds of the color. So whether that's pixels or whatnot. So, okay. So let's take a look one by one here. This is the photographs of before and after of the 1957 card. And as you can see, the card before looks really good. This yellow in the bottom section is absolutely amazing, bright, full of pop. And then after 11 days of full sun, and all these cards had 11 days of full sun, you see the yellow is pretty much gone. And then the other colors have started to fade as well. So if you're ever wondering, can I tell if a card is fading? One of my guesses would be to look at some of these primary colors that are used in printing, like yellow, magenta, and cyan, and see if those colors have actually faded. Black is not a combination of all the colors. It's typically its own ink print from what I read, so I wouldn't expect a lot of fading there. But as you can see, colors like yellow and kind of this orange color show significant fading. Okay, so to the next card, 19, what was this, 65, and this is of the White Sox team. And so once again, you can see that red color has started to significantly fade from before and after. But these colors where you see some yellow a little more prominent, like in the White Sox banner or second place American League, you actually see significant fading again. So if I was looking at cards to see if they had gone through fading, if maybe they're in a PSA holder or something, I would probably try to see if there was anything yellow in the scene or something that should be yellow, and I would take a look at that. All right, next card, 1978. And here this kind of starts to show, we said substantial fading. And some of the reasons for that is the Astros logo here has faded fairly well as this almost greenish, cyanish border has faded. And then the skin tone is faded. You can see some of that. So again, I would venture to say that's some of the yellow coming out of it. And the helmet that was a nice, beautiful, bright orange yellow has faded a little bit as well. But the dark background here in the back, you can't tell much. And I think that's just a process of the darker inks don't fade like the rest. But you can see the seats have faded. And so we called it substantial, as it was not as noticeable as the previous 2 decades that we had looked at. On to 1986, and we see that the Astros logo up top has a significant fade, but the card overall, we said it was just a substantial fade. And you can see the yellow up here in the rafters has now faded. So once again, if you're trying to see if your card is faded, maybe yellow would be a good place to start. If you have it, obviously. And you can see a little bit on his shoulders, that yellow stripe that the Astros used to have on that uniform is gone. The orange is becoming noticeable as well. And this is same card, so this is before and after photos, and you can tell a significant amount of fading has happened. A little bit less with the blue, but the blue has faded a little bit as well. So again, those primary colors that are used to make cards, looks like that might be one of the best places to look. Going into 1997, so on the 97 card, one of the things that separated it from the previous year's card is that it almost has, like a gloss on it. And it turns out that appears to be a resin that is put on top of the cards. And so I think that card, or cards that have that resin on it or printed with and made that way, I think that is somewhat protecting from UV damage. Not guaranteed to protect, but somewhat protecting. And so for this one, we said it was a gradual fading. And this card was out for 11 days. You can see some of the dirt has faded, slight fading on that big red wall in the back, but the most notable places are on the grass and the dirt in the background. So it's something to consider. Still though, overall this card, after 11 days of being in full sun exposure, looked really well. So the next card becomes very interesting. I decided to go ahead and call this moderate. The reason I did is some of the orange in the jersey has faded. So we're starting to see some fading. The skin tone has faded on Andy's face and arms here. But the pants and the jersey actually look fairly decent, as well as the entire outline of the card looks decent. The problem is in green grass and red dirt, those showed substantial fading. So kind of tried to find a middle ground here and just say this is moderate fading. All right. And then obviously if you disagree, please feel free to leave a comment. Yeah, it'd be kind of nice to hear other people's opinions as well. Okay, so this is last year's card. No, pardon me, this is the 2012 card of Jason Castro. This is when the Astros were wearing that darker uniform. And so we see some fading in the brick, some fading in the folks here in the background. See some of this blue is kind of faded. This a little more cyan blue though, not really as faded. And this jersey back here looks a little more faded. But the uniform still looks pretty good. Again, it's a little more faded, not too much. The Houston across the jersey does look faded, and so does the skin tone. But the rest of it looks actually fairly good. So we called it gradual fading. And the card that faded the least of all is none other than last year's card. This is a Jake Myers rookie card. I had a whole bunch of these out, some inside in a windowsill, some outside full sun, and we just called it minimal fading. The jersey still looks good. Not too sure why exactly or what they did to the card for this, or if it's just a process of time and there just hasn't been enough time for the pigments to break down at all. I just don't know. But this was by far the best card on fading was last year's, or 2 years ago now, I guess, the 2022 Topps Jake Myers card. Okay, so now we have an idea of what it means to look at fading, or how much cards are fading. So what started all these experiments off was in 2020. I was bored, as everybody else was, because of COVID, and I had a chance to actually start running experiments. And one of those experiments was go on Amazon or eBay, buy magnetic UV protectors and test them out, and compare those to non-UV protection, right? So top loaders or penny sleeves or whatever. And then I redid the test in 2022 again. Probably not going to do that this year. Fairly comfortable that the results were fairly close to the same, and so I'm good with it. But here's what the experiments showed. So first, what did we test? Okay, so the first thing we tested was we needed to look at everything. So we needed to look at different sleeves. So we looked at 3 different companies. We looked at what the sleeves were made out of, or what the protection was. And here's what it was. The penny sleeves are made out of polypropylene. It actually says that on the PSA penny sleeves package when you buy them. The top loaders are made out of vinyl, and all that's using the spectrometer here. And I won't go talking too much about this. All 3 UV card protection holders are made out of polystyrene. And polystyrene does have some capability to prevent UV damage from happening. So it absorbs or is reflecting some portion of UV light. And because of that, that's what is protecting our cards. One of the interesting things is if you look at these different sleeves here, you'll see slight different color variation. The purple one here is the number 4 card, which is a BCW, and this is a pro mold. This yellowish one is a pro mold, also made out of polystyrene, but interestingly enough, is yellow. And I've done some reading that says yellow is a sign that it won't do as much UV protection, which will also kind of be interesting that we'll see this BCW one results here in a minute. Okay, so here's what we tested, right? Our polypropylene, our vinyl, and then our polystyrene magazines or UV protectors. And basically this is bare, right? This is a Ultra Pro top loader, and this is a Ultra Pro UV magnetic holder, BCW, and Pro Mold. So those are the cards that or the card holders that we used for the test. And let's get to the results. Okay, so my visual ranking after weathering is as follows. Number 1 is the BCW UV magnetic holder. That's it. This is what it looks like after I think it was 14 days for this one. But after 14 days, it looks amazing. The yellow is still popped out. Okay. Number 2 is the Ultra Pro UV magnetic holder. And so that one is this guy right here. And so you can see it still looks really good. But this card, when we looked at them, even just visually, it was not close. It was number 1 was most definitely the BCW. Pro Mold came in 3rd, which again, not necessarily a surprise. All UV magnetic card holders did provide protection. What I'll say is last time I checked, and it has been a while, BCW not only did the best in 2020, but it was also the cheapest. And so, I don't know, that seems like a win-win. The Bear card obviously scored the worst, and you can see the comparison here of the two. The yellow was almost completely gone. And I know I've said it before, but start looking at these primary colors if you want to see the difference, if something's faded, or if maybe it's just printed differently or something. I would start to kind of look at these primary colors if I could in the card. Okay, so we had to do it again. And so in 2022, I ran almost the same test. The difference was I no longer needed to worry about the penny sleeves or the top loader. Instead, I went to a local card shop. We have a great local card shop here in Fairborn, Ohio. And so, so the guy sold me this card case, magnetic ultimate guard, and I added that to the test as well. And so this time we looked at 1990 Topps cards. By the way, that is one of the most interesting card sets ever. If you read how they're printed and how it works with your eyes to display the card, completely new respect for the 1990 Topps card. Okay, so let's look at our ranked after weathering results. So here they are. Ranked after weathering results. At number 4, Pro Mold. I would say we probably shouldn't be too surprised by this. They were the worst performing in the 2021, even though that was just 3 cards. And the 2022 card experiment came out. Now, you'll notice here that we have some primary colors, kind of the cyan and magenta color. And that's really where we want to focus with this. So there's no yellow in the card. Now that I kind of know yellow is a big deal in cards for fading purposes, I'll try to take more of a look than I did in the past. At a very close second was the Ultra Pro. This time I used a rookie card holder, but they're really made out of the same thing. This is just etched in there. And as you can see, there does seem to be a noticeable difference here in this border between the two, which is why it got 3. But interestingly enough, we finally had a close second, and that was the Ultimate Guard. The Ultimate Guard's card looked really good in before and after photos, and you can see this is fairly close in color when compared to each other, as well as before and after photos of the card itself. And the last was number 1, not last. Number 1 card was BCW again. So after running the experiment twice, I have not run it since. I'm not thinking about running it in 2024, just because you have to typically buy quite a few of these, and you know, each one of these runs a certain amount of money. So I'm not planning on running this again. I'm planning on doing some different things for the summer that I won't talk about now. But this is fairly close. It really shows up better in person. All the colors here just looked sharper and more bold, especially these blues here. If you look at these blues, that it showed just completely different. So I put BCW back on top, and again, last time I checked, 2022 is probably last time. Maybe 2023 I checked, but I don't remember. But BCW was still pricing cheaper. Okay, so let's do some final notes really quick. So one of the things I didn't cover in my fading test, or at least in the results here, was the slabs that are very popular in the hobby. I did attempt to use an SGC card to see how well it faded, as well as a PSA card. I think I did not use a CSG at the time, now CGC. But the problem was that the cards were newer, and so they didn't fade at all. They were also very dark cards, because I was going to, if I'm going to test a card that's been scored, I need to find the cheapest I can find, because I don't want to waste my budget on a good card and seeing how well it fades. So I bought some, I believe they were Eloy Jimenez cards, and they just were too dark, so it couldn't really get a good idea on how well they were fading. So I had to go to plan B in that, and that was looking at PSA's border. And so PSA's border on this is my Ed Bailey card. I know if you've watched the videos in the past, you've seen this card because I'm a fan of Ed Bailey and I like collecting his cards. But you know, this is what PSA's border is supposed to look like. I really don't let this card out a lot. I like keeping my cards and storage where they're safe, and then I'll pull them out, I'll look at them, and then I put them back. But for this PSA card, the Eloy Jimenez card, I had it out for 11 days, and you can see over the course of that 11 days, it started bleaching here on the border. I imagine we would have seen the same thing if we had looked at the card. So with that being said, I don't believe PSA, SGC, or CGC have any sort of UV protection. I have looked through some other notes on this and just haven't seen any proof at all. Supposedly Beckett does. I know Beckett is not very popular in the hobby right now. They were at one point, they were the scoring people. And maybe we need to talk about giving Beckett another shot, especially if they're doing any sort of UV protection for your cards. It's something to think about. I also understand a lot of people are going to say, I don't want the Frankenstein's Monsters collection. And so maybe that's right. Maybe you go for your 1962 set in Beckett instead of CGC, SGC, or PSA. I don't know. But Beckett supposedly does. They have a patent on it. They did not renew the patent, so you just need to find out if they're still using any polystyrene plastic, and that will provide some UV protection for some amount of time. So further analysis is needed to understand UV effects on card fading with slabs, and some of that goes to all the things I said here. I don't know for sure if it would have provided any protection. This card's very dark. There's no yellow in it, now that I know these things. So that pretty much wraps up everything I have. I'm working on what I'll do over the summer, and I think a lot of that will be looking at, can I tell any sort of modifications to cards, and can I tell a difference in printing versus bleaching? So I hope to have those results to you by the fall. Until then, it'll be me just showing off my current card collection. And so I have some cool cards to show pretty soon. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you're thinking. I'll talk to you guys later.